Throughout history, humanity has seen different types of criminals and killers. But out of all these killers, those who murder their fellow humans and then eat them are on a whole different level. What happens then when these criminals are locked up? Do they live in fear for their lives, or do their fellow inmates fear them? Let's find out what happens to cannibals in prison. Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer and cannibal whose saga of evil has been given new life in the hit Netflix series Monster.
He is pure evil, but you'd never know it by looking at him. But when you hear him, that's another story. His killing field was Milwaukee, and he got away with murder for more than a decade.
Often known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster, is possibly the most famous cannibal in history. With 17 killings to his name, just the mention of his name sends a cold chill down the spines of Milwaukee residents. His crimes were so terrible that he could only be described as a heartless monster who kills unprovoked. So here's the big question: who was Jeffrey Dahmer, and what could have turned this innocent-looking man into a heartless monster? And how was his time in jail? Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Most people believe that his family background may have played a pivotal role in creating this monster. His father, Herbert Dahmer, was a research chemist, while his mother was a teletype machine instructor. During his childhood, he spent less time with his father, who was mostly busy carrying out research, so he spent the majority of his time with his mom, who had her fair share of problems, including depression and a constant need for attention. As a result, neither parent gave enough attention to their son. During his freshman year at Revere High School, Dahmer was seen as an outcast as his troubles at home got the better of him, and he finally fell into alcohol. His parents were always fighting, and this led to their divorce in 1978. The same year, Dahmer would murder his first victim, Stephen Mark Hicks, a hitchhiker. This murder would set him on the path of no return, and he would end up killing 16 more people. According to Dahmer, he began actively seeking victims, most of whom he met around gay bars, who would usually entice them to his grandmother's house in West Allis, Wisconsin. He would drug his victims and strangle them to death after they became unconscious. He would then dismember their bodies and dump the remains in the trash. Dahmer's reign of terror would come to an end on July 22, 1991, when his attempt to kill his 18th victim, Tracy Edwards, failed, and he was arrested.
Milwaukee police found body parts in a North Side apartment, and now they wonder if they've uncovered some kind of death factory. Police found parts of bodies, leading them to believe the man they arrested is a mass murderer.
Dahmer gave up his right to have a lawyer present during his interrogations and stated that he wanted to confess to his crimes. He claimed that he had created this horror and would do anything to put an end to it. He admitted to consuming some of the victims' hearts, livers, biceps, and thighs. Dahmer was charged and later pleaded guilty in court. During Dahmer's sentencing, the courtroom was packed with drama as the victims' families expressed their sadness. As surprising as it may seem, Dahmer's attorney revealed that his client wanted to address the court. Dahmer read from a statement prepared by himself as he faced the judge. Dahmer even stated that he knew his time in prison would be a total nightmare. He told the court, "I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I've done." It appears that he was right. During his first year of incarceration, Dahmer was confined in solitary confinement due to concerns about his safety. Surprisingly, Dahmer's request was to be moved to a less secure facility, and this is where he dropped the ball. On July 3rd, 1994, another inmate, Osvaldo Durruti, attempted to cut Dahmer's throat with a razor embedded in a toothbrush as Dahmer sat in the prison chapel. He miraculously survived the attack, but he would not be fortunate next time. A few months later, on the morning of November 28, 1994, Dahmer was discovered on the floor of the gym's bathroom. He was suffering from severe head injuries and was pronounced dead an hour later at the neighboring hospital. Fellow inmate Christopher Scarver had repeatedly hit Dahmer on the head with a metal bar until he became unconscious. Dahmer knew something like this was going to happen. According to Dahmer's family, he had long been prepared to die and would accept any punishment he would receive in prison. Well, if you think that was scary, then wait until you hear about the cannibal who had schizophrenia. But before then, let's talk about this female cannibal who became the first female to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Katherine Knight. Most lovers' quarrels usually end with a simple apology, but it wasn't so for Katherine Knight. She was in so much rage that she stabbed and murdered her lover. Katherine Knight was born into a dysfunctional family. Her mother, Barbara Rogan, was married to Jack Rogan and lived with him in Aberdeen, New South Wales, Hunter Valley. Unfortunately, Barbara was having an affair with Ken Knight, who is a friend and co-worker of her then husband. When the affair was exposed, Ken Knight and Barbara were forced to leave town and live elsewhere. Barbara had 4 more children with Ken, including twin daughters born in 1955, Katherine and her sister, Joy. Ken and Barbara's relationship was not as pleasant as everyone thought. Behind the scenes, Ken was a violent alcoholic who would often attack his wife. Barbara in turn frequently told her daughters sensitive details about herself, including how much she hated men. All of this occurred when Katherine was still young, and it had an impact on her later in her life. When Katherine was 18, she first met her future husband, David Stanford Kelly. The two got married a year later, in 1974. The marriage would start on a rocky path as Katherine would attempt to strangle Kelly on their wedding night because he fell asleep after having intercourse 3 times. This wasn't the end of Katherine's violent episodes of abuse. As she continued to abuse him, Kelly couldn't take it any longer, and he decided to leave her. Katherine moved in with John Charles Thomas Price in 1995. This would turn out to be a very bad decision, as Katherine's terrible crime would occur just 5 years later. As time passed, the relationship began to fall to pieces due to her uncontrolled anger, which resulted in her assaulting Price on several occasions. Katherine's violent abuse was increasing every day, and Price's friends no longer associated with him because of her. Price became fed up and decided to act. On February 29, 2000, Price stopped at the Scone Magistrates Court on his way to work and took out a restraining order to keep Katherine away from himself. While he was sleeping, Katherine got to work, stabbing him 37 times and professionally flaying his body with her favorite knife. She created a skin suit and hung it from a meat hook before decapitating him and boiling his head in vegetables and gravy on his stove. She also placed dishes with the name of the children since she meant to serve his body pieces to them. Katherine's initial offer to plead guilty to manslaughter was refused, and she was charged with murder, to which she pleaded not guilty. However, as the jury was being formed, Katherine changed her plea to guilty, and the jury was dismissed. She was then sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole, making her the first woman to have that judgment passed on her. This captivated the interest of the nation, and a book was written about her. The book, Green is the New Black, details her life inside the fearsome Silver Women Correctional Center. As it turns out, the prison authorities never take their eyes off her. She is well guarded by 4 guards every day, and she cannot have a cellmate. Surprisingly, her behavior in prison is completely different from what she was like outside. She would stop girls from stealing and fighting, but she would never do it by standing over them. She was never seen attacking anyone. According to one of her inmates, everybody adored her. While the inmates adore her, the prison officers have conflicting feelings about her. One officer even claims that she is the top boss of the jail. She takes no crap from anyone and gives it to the guards. If you come in to search her cell, she will stand in front of you with a smug face and scream at you. One thing's for sure, it does seem like a bad idea to mess with her. Nikolai Zumigo is believed to have slaughtered and cannibalized at least 10 people, mostly women. What is shocking is that he committed all these horrible crimes within 2 years between 1979 and 1980. To the outside world, Nikolai was seen as a well-spoken gentleman who usually dressed well. Nikolai was not a loner, but he usually kept to himself, going around town and meeting various women. His favorite spot in town was close to a riverbank, where he would usually lure young girls to the dark end of the park. He would then abuse them before hacking up their bodies with a knife and axe that he always kept on him. That's not all. He would then cook up parts of his victims and eat their flesh. When he was arrested, the police discovered that he normally threw get-together parties with friends, where he would cook up big amounts of meat to be shared with his friends unknown to them. What is surprising is that Nikolai had been arrested and charged with murder several times before, and he never spends a long time in jail as if he had a get-out-of-jail-free card. For example, in August 1979, after drinking so much alcohol, he accidentally shot his coworker, and he was arrested. However, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was released within less than a year, returning to the outside world to continue his cannibalism. So how was he finally arrested? There are 2 popular stories about how he was finally arrested. The least popular one claims that two town drunks, whom he invited to his house for snacks, led police to him. Upon entering the house, the drunks discovered a woman's head along with intestines in the kitchen, ready for cooking. While the most popular version of his arrest claimed that Nikolai's ninth murder was the one that led to his arrest. He invited his friends and their girlfriends to his house. However, driven by his passion for murder, Nikolai eventually kills one of his friends and begins to dismember him in the next room. When the other guests came looking for them, they saw him carrying out his terrible crime. They fled the house in terror and reported the incident to the police. On arriving at the scene, police officers quickly apprehended him. The officers were so shocked by what they discovered that Nikolai managed to escape. He fled naked to the mountains, holding an axe. He was tracked down the following day and arrested. Nikolai's stay in jail is quite different from other cannibals on this list, because he had previously been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he was again declared insane and sent to a special treatment facility, where he remained for the next 8 years. On August 29th, 1989, Nikolai was being transported to a normal mental health hospital when he escaped using the same car in which he was brought and was later declared a fugitive. After 2 years on the run, it became increasingly difficult for him to hide as the authorities increased their search for him. So he came up with a bright idea. He decided to divert attention away from his hideout and misled investigators by making them think that he was in Moscow. He asked a friend to take a letter he had written to a friend in Bishkek and mail it from Moscow. The letter ended with the words, "Now I'll return soon. There are a lot of beautiful women here, and no one will notice their loss." His plan worked, as the press and numerous newspapers spread rumors that the killer was in the capital. Unfortunately for him, his time on the run was cut short when he was finally arrested in 1991. He is currently isolated from society and detained into a specialist psychiatric clinic. Which of these cannibals scared you the most? And what do you think about their life in jail? Let us know in the comments below. And please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.